Southsiders Studios is now on Stitcher. Listen to us on your iPhone, Android phone, BlackBerry, and WebOS phones. Stitcher is smart radio for your smartphone. Find it in an app store or at Stitcher.com. Stitcher Smart Radio, the smarter way to listen to radio. Cinesmack contains spoilers of the spoiling type. If you don't want your spoilers spoiled, please turn back now. Otherwise, enjoy the show!
Hello, Cinesmacketeers, and welcome back to the podcast that knows that Betamax is the way to go. I'm your host, Mike Keeler. Joining me tonight, as usual, is Mr. Sam Kwame.
Beta to the max, brah.
Thanks, Sam. Mr. Tom Haggis.
Hey, everybody. Sorry, I have anything funny to say.
and Mr. Gabriel Rowell.
Good evening, folks.
Well, see, Tom, you did better than that.
After Sam, I couldn't come up with anything better than that. So.
Well, this podcast, wow, this is our third try. I guess that's third try is the charm. We've had some sickness. We've also had some storms to where no one had, well, two of you didn't have electricity. So this better be good. That's all I got to say.
It's all not a good start yet.
All right. Well,
this is a bad night for me. Can we do this another night?
Yeah, I feel my power going out.
Flicking your light switch on and off, Gabe, is not going to work.
Yeah.
All right.
Just for our video podcast then.
Right. All right, let's move on to Poking the Monkey. Here we go.
Ladies and gentlemen, knowns and unknowns, welcome to the main event. Tonight, we have a deadly documentary duel between two films that pull back the silver screen. In the first quarter, from 2012, directed by Christopher Keneally, featuring Christopher Nolan, Danny Boyle, and Robert Rodriguez, side by side. In the second quarter, from 2012, directed by Ian Romaine and Michael Schwartz, featuring Xander Berkeley, Bruce Davison, and Gregory Itzin. That guy who was in that thing!
Let's get this going then. Let's move on to our first round, which is writing. If you can consider that for these films. But go ahead, fellas.
When we've talked about documentaries in the past, typically, let's talk about the show in general. We talk about the show in general. When we talk about writing or editing, it always gets stuck with the directing, is what we kind of agreed upon when we started. But documentary is one of those cool genres where we get to take editing and move it into the writing category, because I think that's where it belongs. Because the editors are really the ones who take the raw material and produce a story out of it. I think you guys would agree, right?
Yeah, actually, that's a good way to think about it, because I was thinking the same thing. It's like, well, there's not really, in many respects, there's not really writing involved here,
right,
necessarily. But that's a good way to think about it.
Sure. Well, yeah. For the most part, I think there's also some part of the crafting of the director that, in a way, is setting up, not necessarily the written word, but what we're going to hear as far as who is inserted where for the context. And I don't know, some people may go by more of an outline than just shooting it all and letting the editor, dictate the necessary flow. But I think each filmmaker would be quite different in that respect.
Right. But I guess there's still, putting, kind of linking the stories together and everything else. I felt like that guy took it as an approach where they had a set of maybe 20 questions, and they went and they asked each of these guys the 20 questions and then strung them together. And I thought the editing did a really good job of almost seamlessly moving from one topic to the next. I mean, they were able to find one quote that was like, well, that's an interesting quote because we're about to ask you about pay. And, and it seemed like everything kind of went along real smoothly. And I was really impressed with that aspect of it.
Sure, but who do you blame if it's a lame question? Or, I don't make, as far as the writing goes, you wouldn't necessarily blame the editor, would you?
No. But in terms of, I mean, if we were talking about a normal movie, I mean, I'm not going to blame a writer for an actor's lame delivery.
Sure.
But I think the directors and editors work together a lot closer on a documentary because the editor has a much more control over the story structure. And, I suppose in some instances you could have, would have an outline and the editor would have to kind of follow the outline. But I mean, a lot of the pacing and the order of things, I think, get put on the editor's shoulders. So, but I mean, that's just me and my history with documentaries. So I don't know if your guys are different than that.
I agree wholeheartedly with that. Just after coming off of a documentary these past few months, I agree totally with that. You're in charge of telling the story. That's my 2 cents.
Well, and the director then I kind of gets resigned to more of the the style and the look of the documentary. So,
right.
But every instance is different. But it really seemed to me in this instance the editor had a pretty heavy hand in it. I think side by side, the director probably had a little bit more control over it than, because it's just side by side really seemed like they knew the beginning, middle, and end of their story, where I didn't get that from that guy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, and I think there must be a certain amount of writing that happens for any documentary in advance, because I think if you're doing the documentary, you're already sensing some sort of a story there. And for that guy, the story obviously was kind of told through these questions. They already had questions. They already kind of had a story arc a little bit to know which questions to ask. But I do agree with you in that I think the editor kind of brought it all together and made the story flow in that respect. And I think the same. I think it's even more simplified for side by side, because it's basically there's one basic question.
Sure, but there's definitely narration written into the research as far as, say, Keanu's part and his narration, not just
True.
What the other people are saying, but
Absolutely.
in some ways that narration is a bridge to bring everything together. That is right. I think is writing that really helps build the documentary. But of course, the editing is going to come to it. I think editing is good editing, whether it's documentary or if it's a narrative piece or whatever. As far as who wrote some of this narration, we haven't talked much about the films, and I think that in this case, the guy who was in that thing, to me, felt a little less organized and a little more free for all than Side by Side did.
Well, and there's no credited writer on that guy that I can find. I don't know if you guys can see anything, but I couldn't find a credited writer for it.
Yeah, there's not.
Which leads me to believe that I think what we're looking at with these two movies is those two different approaches that you can take to documentary. Go just gather up raw footage and we'll put it together back here, or here's a list of questions. This is the direction we want to take, and these are the people we want to speak to about it. So I think with that in mind, I mean that guy, as well as they did with the editing and stuff, it was a little bit kind of mishmash, and I never really knew where I was in the documentary because I never really felt that we were coming to a conclusion at any point.
Right, and I thought we had a lot of interesting characters, in that, if you can use that term, that they were interesting people, but I didn't feel like I was really getting much of their stories except for one of them. What was his name? The guy who was in the McDonald's commercial.
Yeah.
What was his name? That guy who was in that.
Yeah,
McDonald's
that guy
commercial.
who was in there.
Yeah.
I'll look it up here. Just go ahead.
I didn't know he was the one that I knew the least, I think, out of everybody in that film.
But as far as recognizing him?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I agree with that, but I felt like we got a little bit more of his story, and you started to feel a little bit more for him than you did some of
Sure.
the other actors, because he told that story about kind of hitting rock bottom, and 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 you really felt like there was there was a story there, whereas some of the others, it was just kind of like sound bites, kind of all tacked together.
That's the point where it seemed long, and then it seemed to ended and it didn't resolve itself. Whereas side by side to me felt, I don't know, to me it was very nice to walk all the way through that. Obviously, I felt more engaged with side by side than I did with the guy who was in that thing, just having been around and being part of filmmaking for so many years. I don't know. Did you guys feel more engaged by the subject matter on that film?
On Side by Side?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I found myself actually, I didn't realize I had such a strong opinion about the topic until I watched it, and then I realized I got kind of incensed at times at some of the comments that people were making. It was just didn't make any sense to me. There was no logic to some of the statements. It was just kind of holding on to what was, and I realized at that point that I kind of had a strong opinion myself. So I was definitely more engaged.
I thought the other thing too is Side by Side had a pretty solid message underneath it. It was a really well defined history of traditional and digital cinema, I thought. Whereas that guy, I don't know what the message was, because as soon as somebody would be like, oh yeah, the pay's crap, somebody else would come out like, well, actually the pay's pretty good compared to other people, and then be like, oh, the days are so long. You're like, this is the best job I ever had.
Yeah.
I mean, they constantly were contradicting each other, and I'm like, okay, so the takeaway is it is what you make of it. I'm like, well, then they should do a documentary about the playground across the street from my house, because that's the same thing. Like, hey, this place is a dump. Well, it's kind of fun depending on how you look at it. So that was the most frustrating thing for me, is that there was just no cohesive message. And the most fascinating thing about the documentary was, I was like, hey, who's that? Oh, that's who that guy. And they showed you right away. Oh, that's right. I know who that is. And as soon as I figured out who everyone was and I connected with them, I like the thrill was over for me.
Rick Worthy is who you're thinking of, Gabe.
Is it? I don't see him on the...
Yeah,
IMDb.
he's like clear down on the bottom.
Oh, there he is, yeah. Yeah, that's who I was thinking of. I felt like his story was the most compelling of all of them, because I think I felt like we got more of it.
Yeah, I think you got a little bit more personal with him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you kind of, some of them were just talking about the job, while others actually talked a little bit more about their personal life and how it's affected them. But I agree. He probably went the deepest as far as how it's affected his reality.
Right.
Okay.
So is that the round?
Yeah, I think that's the... You guys have anything else to say?
No, I feel like we were kind of moving away from the whole writing topic.
Yeah,
anyways.
so let's go ahead and cast your votes. Tom.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it to Side by Side.
Okay. Sam.
Side by Side.
All right, and Gabe.
Yeah, I'm going to follow suit. I'm going to go with Side by Side, mostly because of the additional narration and the coherence of the story.
Right. Okay. Let's go ahead and move on then. Since I don't have any trivia for you, I can't... I don't have anything fun to do except push the button.
Like about Keanu and donkeys or something?
All right. Well, with that, let's move on to acting. Go get her, Ray.
All right. Well, this is another topic for documentaries that it seems a little bit out of place, and it's kind of hard to judge on, because there's not really any true, acting per se in these. I mean, these are real people portraying themselves. And, I suppose you could argue that whenever anybody is in front of a camera, they're acting to a certain degree. But I don't know. I don't know what we use to judge this category exactly.
Yeah, I would almost say kind of like subject matter. How about that? Subject matter, or is that too close to the editing? Slash.
I don't know, or maybe just maybe the choice of
people being interviewed.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, and I think obviously, I think that guy has a little bit of a disadvantage in this because they intentionally picked people who are lesser known to a certain degree. Although I recognized most of them right away. I'm like, oh yeah, I've seen all of them, but I didn't know them by name.
Right.
So they were that guy that, you know, but I was able to usually identify what movies or TV shows I had seen them in, but I didn't know them by name necessarily. So I think there's a disadvantage there automatically for them because they're selecting lesser known individuals. But I think they made a good selection of those people. They were people who had been in a lot of stuff, had a lot of experience, and were on some level recognizable. But I really think side by side, as far as the people they selected, that was like top notch. Those that generally speaking, the creme de la creme of all the filmmaking artists. They couldn't get them all in there, but they got some pretty good ones in there. Martin Scorsese, David Fincher, James Cameron,
George Lucas and his gobbler.
George Lucas.
He had a turkey gobbler. I swear to God.
Oh, I know. Yeah, he was strangely difficult to look at times, but I did have a lot of respect for what he had to say, and I guess I gained a little bit more respect for him from a filmmaking standpoint.
Fincher was great. Christopher Nolan was great.
Christopher Nolan, yeah, so I think they really had top notch people. They had real pros that they were interviewing in this. So I definitely think Side by Side has an advantage.
Yeah, I think the filmmakers in Side by Side used, the insiders to give you a deeper base of the subject matter that they're looking at. Whereas the guy who's in that thing is like, that's the premise they keep repeating is like, yeah, you kind of know him, but you don't. Whereas Side by Side, they're utilizing their interviews a lot more shrewdly with this cast of ensemble characters to kind of give you all aspects of the discussion that's going on, good and bad, from people you respect on both sides. So it becomes very engaging as a viewer to say like, well, Chris Nolan really likes film. I hope he keeps shooting on it. And, George Lucas is kind of a parody of himself anyway at this point. But I don't know. What do you think, Tom?
I really enjoyed Side by Side and the people they chose to put in it until I got to Lorenzo de Bonaventura.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about this fucking asshole. Sorry, I'm getting my mic a little bit closer to my mouth. So this fucking guy has a problem with things going digital and cameras getting into the hands of us lesser known filmmakers.
Yeah.
Because there'll be no taste master. No one to dictate what a good movie is. Now, if this had come from Scorsese or Spielberg or Soderbergh's, a proven filmmaker, I would have been like, well, I can kind of see what you're talking about because you are a tastemaker. You are setting the standard. You are setting the bar. But this guy, who is responsible for, all apologies, Mike, Transformers 1, 2, and 3,
Yeah,
and Constantine, and the G.I. Joe movies. I mean, he single-handedly raped my childhood, and he's fucking talking to me about setting the bar too low? Are you kidding me?
Right.
I have no idea.
The audience is always the judge maker because even though some of those films were really well funded and whatever, the audiences hated them by the time it got to the third Transformers or what have you. It's like
and think about the movies that. Just the movies the four of us could have made with that much money. How many movies could we have made that would have been infinitely better with a little bit of work? But he's throwing millions and millions and millions of dollars at these crappy movies, and he does he have any right to, say something like that? And it actually drove me nuts until he said that, and Keanu Reeves, God bless him, just said, "Wow." And it is my favorite Keanu Reeves because he was in his first movie. De Bonaventura. He was in Constantine, and Constantine is one of those movies that are kind of a punchline, And I know that his movies are popcorn movies, and I get that, but for him to just somehow establish himself and say the rest of us are making crap after what he puts out and spends Let's say billions, because he does.
He's not that much of a purist either, because in a lot of ways his work is so digitized by the time it's come out. It's basically a digital print onto film after all the films they added to that particular.
Yeah.
Well, and look at
condescending to everybody. Like, audience will always decide. That's why it's like you can never have enough independent films, because if you have more variety, some will sink and some will fall. But why not let them try?
Well, I'm glad Tom brought that to task, because that really bugged the shit out of me when I heard it. Like, I was literally yelling at the TV. I'm like, what? And then I did the same exact thing Tom did, and I went and looked at all the movies that he's produced, and I'm like, oh. Even though I do like Transformers, I will say this: most of the other ones, no.
This isn't somebody who is an established Hollywood. I mean, he's an established Hollywood guy, but Constantine was his first movie 8 years ago.
Yes,
so I mean, this isn't even like. I mean, come on.
It's not like he's been in the. It's not like he's been in the film world for 30 years.
No, and I think he's a family guy. That his dad was a big time producer, and he's just riding his dad's coattails in. I was on a treadmill when I was watching this, and I fell off.
That's a visual right there.
Yeah. So I am, and I mean, and in terms of that guy, you know, I thought that their stories were very genuine, and I thought all of their stuff came from a very real place. While I really loved hearing from everybody in Side by Side, I thought Lorenzo botched it for everybody else. So if Scorsese gets pissed off that he doesn't get my point for this category, he can call Lorenzo and bitch him out.
I did love the actors in that guy, because I identified with most of them and celebrate their work. And you know, I thought, I really enjoyed seeing glimpses of them. I kind of wanted to know a little bit on some. The guy that was the cornflower blue Thai boss in Fight Club, love that guy.
Yeah.
And then I kept thinking, why doesn't someone, whoever made this film, cast all these people in one movie?
Yeah, that would be awesome.
I thought that too, actually.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, let's cast all these people. Well, and you know, the thing is, they're actually, you know, they're actually, I would say, fairly well known. It's just the name isn't there. The faces are instantly recognizable for most of them.
Right.
There were a few of them I didn't recognize, but I think it's only because I don't really watch any of the. I've never really watched what they were in. But they were popular shows. They just shows I never really watched.
And there were the. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
But on one level, you know, they are kind of unknowns, but on another level, they're pretty successful at what they're doing. If you think about it, you know, that niche that they're filling, they're pretty successful in that niche.
Yeah, and the numbers that they put up at the beginning, you know, 250,000 actors, and 100 of them are considered big stars. These guys are still probably in the top 2,000 of those 250,000 actors. There is a shit ton of actors underneath them who I'm sure have really interesting stories too. If you want to watch somebody, you know, wait tables and whatnot. But no. I mean, and I'm friends with a lot of those actors and people that have SAG cards and after cards.
Then you get the work and then the payoff. So I think that could sell.
Yeah, and I kind of felt that I was like, you guys are not the, you know, lower tier actors. You're not the ones making $5,000 a year at this,
right?
You know. The other thing I thought was really interesting about that guy is that I had kind of always gone in assuming that there was a real divide between TV and movie actors, and this is just something I've come to in the last week, is that there really isn't a difference anymore, that the TV and movie actors constantly go back and forth, because I'm watching that guy and I don't watch a lot of TV. I watch a lot of movies, and so a lot of the actors were stronger in the TV, and so I'm like, I have no idea who this guy is because I don't watch Law and Order or CSI. Right. But then I'm watching the Emmys last night, and all of these movie actors are winning awards. So I'm like, I guess we're at a point now where TV, movie, internet, everything's just kind of blurring into one giant blob of entertainment, which is great. I think it's nice. And
you see the stars going back to television for the first time in force in a long time, because instead of paying for as much reality, they're saying, let's just get the stars and make big shows again.
Yeah.
Whether they're going to succeed or not, that's another question. But
and I think it's raised the bar for those kinds of shows too. They're like, you know, we've really got to be good in order to compete against this reality TV fad. Maybe it's not a fad. That's just wishful thinking on my part. But so I really think like they've upped the ante for drama and comedy on TV, and I think that attracts more and more actors too. Because if they can have really compelling, really interesting, really good parts on television, why not?
Yeah.
And it's probably a more regular paycheck than a movie. You go and you shoot for 3 months and you're done. Whereas TV, depending on if it's a good show or not, it could go on for years.
Yep.
Right. And the expanded players, with Netflix, with the cable channels, with things like that. It's like almost a Wild West coming up.
Time's up, fellas.
Oh, good, because James Spader in Blacklist starts in 26 minutes. Let's go on.
I know, that's like staring me down on the website.
Because what's happening in your IMDb?
I know, on IMDb.
Yeah.
It's been everywhere today.
I actually kind of want to watch it. But anyway, give me your votes, fellas. Let's start with Sam. Or Gabe. Or whoever.
Okay. I think side by side because of the for lack of a better term, the quality of the people that they interviewed.
Tom.
Overall.
I'm going to that guy because of that guy that was in Side by Side.
All right. Sam.
I'm giving it to Side by Side for Keanu. Like, he was acting in some of those scenes. So, and they also had a great slate of people that they were talking to too, but I'd have to say Side by Side.
All right. Well, I think you guys covered on everything that I wanted to talk about, so good job.
Thank you.
Good job. Let's move on to directing, and let's get it on.
Why didn't the director of that guy who was in that thing actually direct it? There's two of them, so they should have been able to give some kind of control to the movie, and while they're filming this endeavor, probably over a year or so, try to find some kind of continuity points that would help craft the film in whole, because whoever was sitting in on those interviews knew what they were getting and what similarities and maybe some mismatches they weren't getting. Mm-hmm. So maybe if they made more of an adjustment on that, I felt Side by Side all the way around was just a much more thought out documentary, one that was informative and also used the talent that they had lined up to interview to great success and to enlightenment of the viewer. Which that's a big payoff if I can come out of a movie being engaged, having an opinion one way or another, but then also learning new information. So as much as I enjoyed the guy who's in that thing, I think it was kind of a missed opportunity to really put a bow on a project that's interesting and had some good talent. So yeah, I'm leaning Side by Side like heavy, like.
And I agree with you, Sam. I thought the continuity, just like with it felt like they used like 6 different cameras, and the framing was all up different on a whole bunch of them. And I mean, it's not that hard to frame an interview the same way every time, and it was just very disjointed. And the part that drove me the nuts, and this is a rights thing that drove me the nuts the most. God, okay, is the lack of B-roll in that guy. I mean, there was like virtually no B-roll. There was a couple of promotional stills that they used, but it was really just talking head. And I don't know. I mean, that's really hard to edit together. So I mean, kudos to the editor in that regard, because nothing to cover up a jump or anything like that in what someone's saying to help speed things along. But there was no footage from any films or TV shows that these guys were in, and obviously that's hard to get permission to use that stuff, but if I was making a movie like this, the first thing I would be like, well, can we get any of the shots of these guys doing their work? No? Well, then we don't really have a film.
Yeah.
Well, and Side by Side, I think overall, the production quality was just considerably higher. Like you said, in that guy, it did look like they used different cameras, and sometimes it looked like maybe they used their phones. And I'm not against that. If it lends something to the film, like if there's a reason for it, like we're doing this because this character is shooting with their phone, but it just seemed like they didn't have the same equipment each time. And the thing that bothered me is a lot of you were right, the framing wasn't good sometimes, and other times they would kind of change the shot, change the framing during the interview, while they were talking, and it sometimes wasn't very smooth. It was kind of awkward, and I was like, wow, this is just it seems very amateurish, and it was distracting to me at times. It took me out of their stories, and I was looking at the production value of it. And we were talking, I think, briefly before we started recording about, how long of a period of time did they shoot this? Because, some of the actors looked considerably different at times. Gregory Itzin had a beard sometimes and sometimes didn't.
Yeah.
And, and you felt like chronologically the quality of the film was different too. Like, and maybe they were early on they were shooting on this camera, and then later on they borrowed a better one or something. I don't know, but Side by Side just had a much higher production value. It just seemed more polished to me, and it did feel better put together. And on top of that, I felt like it was fairly informative, and it was compelling because, like I said before, it actually kind of got me riled up, and it made me realize that I have a strong opinion about the topic. So I don't know. Side by Side just feels a lot stronger to me.
So, does anybody know the director's work? Christopher was Kennelly, is that it?
For that guy.
For Side
by Side, Christopher Keneally.
Yeah.
Keneally.
I'm just looking at that because, like, he did good work.
Yeah, well, he was a production manager on quite a few films. He was director on 3, a short and 2 documentaries.
Nicholas Nickleby, I love it. Mr. Charlie Hunnam, ladies and gentlemen. It was really good. Side by Side, like directing, I think heads and shoulders above. Like if I had to vote, I would totally do that.
Tom, you have anything?
On that guy on the DVD, there's actually some deleted scenes, and there's actually one where Gregory Itzin goes in and takes a shit and shaves, and then they move to a new location.
Well played, sir.
It's riveting. So if you can find the DVD, that kind of explains why he loses the beard halfway through the interview.
And looks a little skinnier.
Right, that explains why he got skinnier too.
Yeah.
He dropped a few pounds.
Well, he dropped a few pounds, all right.
You guys are dirty. All right, well, should we just go ahead and put it to a vote here?
Oh, no. Go ahead.
Sam.
Side by Side.
All right. I could have answered that for you. Tom.
Yeah, Side by Side.
All right. And Gabe.
Yeah, Side by Side.
All right. One thing I do want to say, though, is I've always been a fan of character actors. Like, because, I don't know, it just seems like they get more work. Sure, they get less pay, but they get more work. And it's always fun to say, oh, he was in that, or he was in this. And you remember, he was in that one thing. But as a filmmaker, I just loved listening to the ideas on Side by Side, except for what's his ass, the Taste Master. We'll just call him the Taste Master.
I don't think we should call him that. Oh, it's a joke. I get it. We're making fun of him. Yes, good. Let's do that.
Well, it's nice to be, swept up in that story too, of thinking of our friends and colleagues that have shot on some of those different cameras and will shoot on those in the future. It changes the dynamic of watching something like that.
Yeah.
And also, again, very engaging. Like I believe it was the whole way through.
Yep. All right. Well, let's move on to overall.
Well, I think this is. I mean, we kind of pointed out the difference between the two of these, and overall, I think we kind of see where this is headed. Of all of the faults that I have for that guy, I'm going to go back to the fact that it was just disjointed in a lot of different ways. I can forgive a documentary if it kind of meanders through the topic, as long as the interviews are conducted in the right way and that things, have a cohesive feel. But it just seemed like everything with this one was just kind of all over the map. And when you put it side by side with side by side, that's all. I just wanted to say that. No, but it was just an overall feel. And when everything is disconjointed, it just underlines the fact that there's no message there. There's no real underlying theme. It's just, hey, look at these guys. And I think that really hurt it because I think that there were some really great stories there, but I feel like the whole documentary on a whole just like go back to the drawing board and come up with a new way to approach the story, because the final product wasn't really something that I'll probably watch again, to be honest with you. That's right. That's what I did.
That's it.
Silence.
That's it. That's all. You said it all.
True. He speaks the truth.
Hang on. I'm going to drop my microphone. There you go. Not the one I'm using. I'm using that one. I won't drop it.
I was waiting.
So was I.
Yeah.
There it is. No, that sounds like I'm in a fight.
Right. Or underwater. You're going to drop it in the toilet?
Boom.
Well, I agree. I agree with Tom. I love the subject matter of that guy who was in that thing, but it just, I don't know. There was just something about it that didn't grab me as much as the side by side.
We're into overall now, right?
Yeah. Yep. And honestly, like side by side, I'm on the digital side. As much as I would love to one day shoot with film.
Sure.
I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to shoot with film. But if it wasn't for digital, none of us would be making films.
Sure.
I mean, maybe we would be, but
sure.
It wouldn't be as easy for us.
It's not going anywhere.
Right.
The evolution of digital doesn't have to mean the death of film. That's one thing I kind of disagreed with. I know they wanted to play that up, but one doesn't necessarily mean the death of the other. And that's why I think people that are freaking out on either side have to know is that it's a tool. If someone wants to use the grain of film and they believe they can get a different image, then they'll do so.
Well, and I'm surprised they didn't have Quentin Tarantino on there.
I got to disagree with you, Sam. I think film is not dying, but I mean, they're certainly going for checkups once a week because it's not. Sure. It doesn't look good. I don't know 25, 30 years from now if anybody will be shooting on film because you're going to start seeing people nip. What's Kodak going to do? Keep producing film for the five guys still shooting on film? I mean, eventually it's going to come down to a business decision.
The same arguments happen when they started to phase out Super 8 and Regular 8 film. Yes, it's dropped. It's not the norm anymore, but people are shooting and developing, and Kodak is still selling. Yeah. There's going to be a call for shooting on film. It's never going to be totally dead. And with 16, which is still be an accessible media for students for years to come, as long as Kodak can get someone to do it, I don't think it's totally dead. But you're right. Digital is the wave of the future.
Well, and film itself may have to evolve a little bit as well. And I think it is to a certain degree in that, you've got film's got to be able to provide something that video can't match. And for a long time, it just was flat out image. It just couldn't match. But now, digital is getting pretty close. And you can do things digitally to make it look a little more film if that's what you're going for. Mm-hmm. But in order to kind of separate itself a little bit more, maybe Christopher Nolan has the right idea shooting on things like, super huge formats like the IMAX format and that kind of thing, because that's going to be fairly hard for, digital to match for a while. So, I don't know that film's going to completely die out, but I think I'm a little bit more on Tom's side. I think that it's definitely going to be used a lot less, and then the expertise to use it is going to be fading quite a bit too.
And the gear to shoot it, and eventually, it'll get to the point where there'll be some things that are just not available, or people that don't know how to shoot it. But it'll still be there for people to use as a different tool. Like I think digital's a tool as well. I dug the filmmakers most that saw it as such. To say, if I want to shoot in really grainy black and white for a specific sequence, I'm going to do it. Or conversely, if someone says, I want to be freed up by this really lightweight camera, even though some people don't think the image quality is acceptable, fuck them. That's how I'm making my movie.
Yeah.
So,
right. It's a choice. It's not a limitation.
I want to make it real clear too that while I see the death of film happening in the near to medium future, I'm not happy about it. I'm a romantic, and I miss the feel that feeling of sitting in a movie theater and knowing that I'm watching a light bulb pass through an individual celluloid and projecting it up on a screen. I love that feeling, and I miss that, and that's something my kids will never get to feel, because it's such a communal experience, and digital is going to kind of replace that, and it's going to be hard to describe to people the difference between the two. And it's a very romantic notion and everything, and I'm going to miss that. And I don't want to make people feel that I was like, yeah, fuck film. No, I'm not. I am very much a film fan, and I'm gonna miss it with all my heart. But I am very much aware of where this is going.
I remember the first film I ever went to see with Tom. He's like, no, we got to wait. We got to sit through the credits till we see the negative cutter. Remember that?
Mo Henry.
Yeah. So every time that we went to see a movie, we would wait until we saw the negative cutter credit come up, and then we could leave.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, I agree. I'm a romantic as well as far as film stock is concerned. I love looking for the cigarette burns. You know, what they called it when they were changing the reels. There was something about that. I don't know if it's just the movie geek in me. I always, whenever I saw that, I'm like, oh, it's changing reels. You know, it kind of made it interactive for me. But digital is something that film's not going to be able to stop. And Chris Nolan should come out with a speech like Charlton Heston, you're going to pry it from my cold, dead hands.
No. Shoot digital in a few months.
Yeah.
He'll make the switch. I mean, I know they're impassioned, but you're right. That's how things are going to go. And the audience is the better for it, so that's why it's going to continue to go that way, much as Blu-rays, that's why it's going to go that way, is because that's the medium that the masses will accept now.
Exactly. I mean, it can be, some people say it's cheaper, faster. Other people, just like in a film, say it's not. But I'll go back to my same argument. If it wasn't for that, most of us wouldn't be doing what we're doing.
Sure.
And
one thing I have to point out here real quick, overall, the reason why the guy who's in that thing is going to lose miserably is because they didn't follow through on their one premise, which was, hey, let's get you to know the name of that guy who's in that thing. And they chose not to use titles on these individuals. If they would have done that repeatedly, by the end of the movie, you would know that his name is so-and-so. Like, this is an instance where you want to overdo the fuck out of those titles so that you actually know who it is by the end of it.
Yeah.
Yep.
One other, this is a minor thing too. When in high school and college, when everything was filmed being projected at movie theaters, I was a big opening weekend kind of guy, because I loved the pristineness of going opening weekend on the first couple passes through the projector. I hate the dollar theater. I mean, the films were so scratched and everything else.
Yep.
But as a result of the digital film transition, I'm finding myself going to the movie theater less, because what happens is I'm like, well, I don't have to get their opening weekend. It's digital, just as nice at the dollar show as it will opening weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Sure,
and then I wind up missing it.
Night. Like, to me, the excitement of an opening night crowd is, it's packed house, then no one has hardly seen it. Like, to me, it's more about the excitement of the people of the first night, not necessarily the print now.
Oh, I don't like people, so I like going like. I want the movie theater to myself.
Trust me, that's not that fun.
See, I think it's fun. It depends on how you look at it.
Yeah, I guess if it was a good movie that you could actually hear, then it might be more fun.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah. I won't tell that story.
Especially horror movies with an audience, like around opening time, because people actually get scared, and and just like the side talk you hear, it's funny. It's like
side talk bad. Side talk bad.
Sometimes side talk can be funny.
I have to say, one of my favorite movie-going experiences, we went and saw Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and I'm not sure that anybody really had any idea what they were in for, necessarily. And after the first fight sequence, it was just fantastic. They literally, the audience stood up and gave a standing ovation to that portion of the film, and that would never happen at home.
You're right.
You know what I mean? And I was like, wow, I have never seen that in a movie theater before. People were so excited about it and so thrilled by it that they actually gave it a standing ovation. I was like, the filmmakers can't see that, but I wish they could, because that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Sure. I love feeling like opening night. Sometimes the audience will applaud after the movie, which you only hear at like live theater shows and what have you. Like, to me, that's a weird experience. It's a welcome experience when something has moved them so much that they need to show their appreciation even in a small way.
That's why I like going to the opening nights of the big popcorn flicks. Like that, not opening nights, but like the midnight showings of, let's say, the Avengers or the Iron Mans or,
Jurassic Park 4.
Jurassic Park 4. Oh.
God save us.
You just get a different crowd, It's like seeing the Star Wars movies when they re-released them. The first showing of that down at whatever theater you're going to. But, the crowd's there, and you know why they're there. They're there for the love of the film, and they erupt, and they laugh at all the right times, just like when I went and saw Blazing Saddles again in the theater. It's just fun. But our time's up, fellas. So, Tom, what's your vote?
I'm going to give it Side by Side.
Sam?
Okay, I've been saving this, but I'm going to give it to Side by Side, but like in New Kids on the Block style. So it's like, side by side.
I'm getting some feedback on my end.
What is that?
Some high-pitched squealing going on. That was impressive. Sam.
That was awesome. Gabe.
I've been saving it. Thank you for saving that.
Gabe.
Yeah, I guess I have to just go with the Lemmings and say Side by Side.
All right. Well, let me go ahead and tally this big number up. Let's move on to our recommendations real quick, and we'll start with Gabe.
Well, I always try to keep it kind of topical when I can. And I saw kind of an interesting documentary recently called The Perfect Human Diet. And my girlfriend and I were just flipping through some movies, and we saw it and said, let's try it. We're interested in eating healthy and different. We're trying to kind of eat more in a primal or paleo style. And we thought this could be kind of interesting. And it started out a little rough, and the production quality isn't really super high, but it ended up being very interesting. And there was some very interesting information about how we eat now and how humans ate for eons before us. Mm-hmm. And it's really kind of enlightening, and it may kind of somewhat change your outlook on what you eat.
Nice. All right, Tom.
I am going to recommend the Chris Rock documentary "Good Hair," which came out 4 or 5 years ago, and it's basically a look at hairstyles in African American women and the lengths they go through to for their hairstyles. I didn't plan that, and so it's really interesting, and just it's very funny and has a very funny approach to it. But at the same time, it's almost shocking how serious some people take their hair. It's absolutely kind of ridiculous, and I'm not poking fun at it, though. I mean, it's something they're very passionate about. But it's a really fascinating documentary, and he travels around the world and puts the story together about, where their hair comes from and the cost of the hair and everything else. And it's really, really fascinating, and I loved it, and I'm a Chris Rock fan, too. So I'd recommend Good Hair.
All right. Thanks, Tom. Sam.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd like to recommend, staying in the documentary line, Ken Burns' Prohibition. Didn't catch it when it first was on public television. It is now on Netflix streaming, and it's another great work by Ken Burns and his crew. It's very dynamic. It's kind of fun to watch a show on prohibition while you're drinking an alcoholic beverage, and realize how close in time we really are to some things that seem outlandish to us. It was amazing, again, to watch a documentary that engages you and makes you think about where your life is in regards to what's happened into the past or possibly the future. But definitely it's a 3-part watch, but all great content and very interesting. Ken Burns' Prohibition. It's on Netflix streaming.
Thanks, Sam. Did you watch the Dust Bowl that he did? His documentary about the Dust Bowl?
I did not see that.
That's fantastic. You just brought it up, and I actually just watched it a couple weeks ago when I had a chance, and it is really good. Like, I had no idea all that stuff happened. Mine is actually going to be part of PBS as well. It's American Masters, Johnny Carson, King of Late Night. It's available on Netflix, and it just follows Johnny Carson's career. It's essentially a biography on him and the show and his death. And I have to say, it was fascinating, and I laughed sometimes to tears on some of the skits that they would show from the show. They're really great. They have some great interviews from like Steve Allen, Mel Brooks, Jay Leno, of course, Steve Lawrence, David Letterman. I would highly recommend it. I think it has almost 5 stars on Netflix.
I think I saw that. They were talking about the point where he was being extorted one time, and did they not talk about that in that documentary?
What was that again? I'm sorry.
He was being extorted, and he basically wanted to do the drop himself. And
where someone, the publisher or Jay Leno's publisher or manager or whoever, put something out in the newspaper that Jay Leno was going to be the next host of the show, mm-hmm. and no one had told Carson, and no one, it was just essentially a publicity stunt. And it really kind of bothered Carson because he wanted to handpick someone, and NBC wasn't really going to let him. So, yeah.
Stuff, yeah. Good pick, Mike.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Actually, those are all great films.
Let's go ahead and poke the monkey real quick so he can tell us who won.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? Your winner by decision is Side by Side!
Did Side by Side almost get a shutout?
Yeah, almost.
Who do we blame? Fucker.
All right.
I'll write him a letter and let him know that he screwed everything up.
Good.
I'll file it away with the others.
Yeah, you will. I'm sorry. My blood pressure's all up now because of that. Bringing that back up again.
Okay, fellas. Well, why don't you tell our listening audience where they can find you, where they can follow you, where they can peek in your window at night while you're sleeping. Sam.
Well, you can stalk me on Facebook if you must, but I don't recommend it.
Gabe.
I can also be stalked on Facebook, although I also don't recommend it because it would actually be really boring. But you can find me on Facebook or our 48-hour film team website, onegenomeshort.com.
And Tom.
People can stalk me on Vimeo and Twitter and Facebook. Please stalk me on Facebook. All my posts are usually about my kids, but it actually encoded in those is actually government secrets. So fun for everybody if you want to stalk me on Facebook.
Yep. I believe Tom is actually on the top 100 list for the NSA. They love watching his Facebook posts.
That black van's back.
You got to keep Tom in your newsfeed, everybody, because it's heartwarming.
That's right. Because if you want to get government secrets, I'm your guy because I know how much stamps are going to be next month.
All right. Well, we would appreciate it if you could leave us a review on iTunes or whatever podcasting service you use. You can contact us at cinesmack@gmail.com. Send us your hate mail. Yeah, let's just leave it at that. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Just search Cinesmack. For the October bout, we get... wow, I can't even type. For the October bout, we welcome back Tosh for his yearly appearance as Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter goes toe-to-toe with Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters. I'm looking forward to this fight, guys. So for Gabe, Tom, Sam, and myself, thanks for listening, and go catch a flick.
Oogak!
I don't even know what that was.
What was that?
It was Jimmy Stewart falling downstairs.
This has been a test of the Southsider Studios podcast system. This was only a test. If this were a true lack of entertainment, your head would explode. Go to iTunes and subscribe to our feed. Just search Southsider Studios.